So I guess just to be respectful of our time, we'll kind of pick this back up. Again, if you, we'll make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to come to another focus group, just so you make sure that you hear everything you want to hear. But since you've been able to get back on, we'll kind of go ahead and keep plugging forward. So I think, Ellen, you want to tell us about your interest in yourself here?
Sure. I'm Ellen Spector. I think I was invited because I'm director of the Firstborn Home Visiting Program in Los Alamos. We serve families prenatally up to age 5 with home visiting. And a lot of our work here is, in addition to helping with parenting support, is referrals to resources. And many of those resources are out of the county social services department and social services department, as well as the other nonprofits around, many of whom are on this call. Another hat I wear is as vice president of the school board. So I'm all about things kids 0 to 18. And I guess as a 25-year resident of the town, either me or my kids has benefited from almost every single program.
National Weather Service. Severe thunderstorm warning in effect for this area until 5 p.m. Central Standard Time for destructive 80 miles per hour winds. Take shelter in.
I apologize. That comes through on my phone even when it's muted. So now we're in a tornado watch, but
I think I can
also
my spiel.
okay. I want to also go back to Abby. I think Abby, you were the one interrupted with the power outage.
Honestly, it's fine. The last thing I was going to talk about was that we're actually in the process of building a special needs playground at our new building up here in Los Alamos, which is, it's, you know, very inclusive for kids with sensory issues. We have a lot of kids up here on the spectrum, and as a special needs mom myself, I have 3 kids on the autism spectrum. It would have been a really great resource when my kids were little, so I'm very excited about it, and we want it to be open to the community. So that's my really exciting thing. So.
Thank you. All right, Corey, who else on?
I'm back.
So I think next was Bob.
Yeah, sorry, we lost power again.
Yeah, well, we kind of hung out for a little bit, Bob, so you haven't missed much.
Okay. Well, I'm Bob Nolan. I'm the president of the Los Alamos Tennis Association. The association's been around since the 50s, and we have about 100 people that I communicate with, I'll put it that way. And therefore, anytime we want something to happen in the community with tennis, I communicate with them. And we play on county courts. We do not have any courts of our own. Neither do the schools, the high school, the middle school, JVs. Have 4 over at the university, but that's it. And all of the districts require 8 or more courts in one location to host their district tournament. Los Alamos has not hosted their district tournament in probably 10 years or more. We used to do it, and we had kids and parents going to just about every court in town. That's an exaggeration, but it did happen a lot. So the league decided, all the high schools decided they would have to have at least 8 in one location. Past 2 or 3 years, I believe, used Capitol High in Santa Fe. So we're looking for courts in one location. And that way we can all use it. We are a community tennis association under USA Tennis. And therefore, we have insurance to cover any of the members that are playing. And we also have a website that they provide the utility, but we maintain it. Also, any kind of programming within the community, we have a communication with the county, but normally right now in this point in time in life, we're fairly older group of people. What happens is we have people moving to town for the summer. Those are younger people, and then they go away. They come back the next summer. So that's what we're after. That's the first thing. And I'm also the president of the Los Alamos Hockey Association. We use the ice rink. And this year is phenomenal. We have 57, what we call Atoms, age of 3 to 7. We have then 30 something of the next mites age group. We have 30 something of the next one, which is the squirts, and on up to approximately the same thing through the bantams. We have a large high school group. And so one of the things we have trouble with is getting started with the season and ending the season with any predictability. The rink needs a cover. Now, we've been through this in the county before. It got defeated in 2017, I believe. And we have people who want to skate out in the, in the open sky. And we understand all these things. But we also have parents spending anywhere from $60 to $600 a year. Now that year is 2 months long. That's all it is. This year's could be worse. We didn't get started until 2 weeks ago, first weekend in December. We normally start the weekend before Thanksgiving. And so it's very short. The rest of the state has indoor arenas, and they start in September. They finish in March. So the best thing that we could ever be able to do would be, in a compromise, would be a retractable roof, soft ones, all that's necessary, not hard. That would be up to the designers. But the idea is that when the sun, at those times of the year, the sun is most intense on the surface. And if we had something to shade the surface, we could start at the 1st of November and we could end at the 1st of March. That's a dramatic increase. And so that's what we're looking for in the Hockey Association.
Thank you, Bob. Carrie?
Hi, Pat. I'm Carrie. I'm Carrie Fanning from Family Strengths Network. We are a family resource center that was established in Los Alamos in 1989. We do a lot of things. It's hard to spill it into a quick elevator speech, but our focus is parent education and parent bonding activities with their children. We have a space in Los Alamos where parents can hang out with their children, and we have discussion groups and different support groups and things that happen. A lot of what we do happens with that kind of prenatal to 5, but we also have some programs that help with other segments of the population. Some of our crowning things, I guess, are we have an awesome toy lending library, which is, we work with the schools on having items in that library for IEPs and that kinds of thing that they can check out for their kids when they have specific assignments and things that they need to do with their IEPs. They can check them out and not have to purchase them. We're contracted with the county. We work with LAPS, which is the public schools here, on a lot of our programs. Most of the people that you see in this group, we collaborate in one way or another on different programs to meet the needs of the community. I'd say the reason I'm here is kind of like Lisa said for youth, is to make sure that our families, all of our families are remembered in this process, but particularly our families with younger children. Los Alamos has been kind of in this transition for the last handful of years where there's a lot of retirement going on and there's a lot of new young families moving in. And we have this thing that happens here. We refer to it as trailing spouses, where one person will get a job at the laboratory and another person doesn't know what they're going to do necessarily in the science community and what we run in. And they're also leaving their families and their support network. And so we run into a lot of isolation among young families, which is something we're really trying to combat and help. And we just want to make sure that those families are remembered in this process, because they're often the families that can't show up and have a voice for themselves because they're knee deep in whatever is going on with their kids and their young families and those types of things. Thank you.
Lauren?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren McDaniel, the Interim Executive Director of Los Alamos Commerce and Development Corporation, also known as LACDC, and also the Director of Los Alamos Main Street. So we're a 501c6 private nonprofit organization with an economic development mission. We manage several different programs under LACDC, including Los Alamos Main Street program, the Chamber of Commerce, the Creative District, both of our visitor centers in Los Alamos and White Rock, our project-wide co-work space, and then we also manage the Small Business Center in downtown and have tenants there, as well as the Los Alamos Research Park. So our involvement in the community is pretty broad. We target both people that are currently living here, people who are thinking of moving here, as well as visitors. So through a contract with the county, we operate the visitor centers. We also have a contract with the county for Main Street services, particularly event related. So we run the 2 parades annually, the Fair and Rodeo Parade and the Holiday Lights Parade and Winterfest, as well as Trick or Treat on Main Street and Hollow Weekend activities, and then also the signature event, Los Alamos Science Fest. I would say, you know, the reason that I'm participating in this group, this focus group, is see how we can enhance our community events and services for our residents, especially in the downtown corridor, and also look into ways that we can integrate the business community in a deeper way. Like Carrie said, with Family Strengths Network, we also target trailing spouses. We see a lot of them come to Project Y to work actually and get out of the house and meet people. So we're also interested in supporting that population as well. Thank you.
So everybody, thanks for hanging on. We've got Catherine Hudspeth, who is our Senior Management Analyst and in charge of our marketing for this project. And then Linda Lindstrom's our logistics and making sure we get all this recorded and put up. So Pat, I think at this point, after a little rain delay, it's all yours.
All right. I'm going to try to share my screen here. All right. Are you seeing one screen or 2?
2. Well, 1, I guess. 1.
Okay.
1 main screen.
That's what I'm looking for.
We see the presentation and the preview slide.
Okay, then I'm going to reverse. Hold on just a second. I'm going to swap them. Now you seeing just the presentation slide?
Not yet.
Didn't change.
Huh, mine did.
There may be a
this
delay.
again.
Well, we just lost it.
Yeah, I'm gonna try it again and see.
There we go.
There you go.
That's got just the one, correct?
Mhm.
Okay, my name's Pat O'Toole. I'm a principal with Green Play. A little bit about myself. I've been in Parks and Recreation for a lot of years. First half of my career, almost 20 years, I was a director or assistant director of 4 different agencies, 4 different sizes, shapes, from counties to districts to municipalities to unit government. And then I started consulting in 1995. Greenplay has been around since 1999, and I've been with them 20 of their 22 years as a principal. And this is exactly what we do and have a passion to do is master planning. Okay, now it's not letting me advance. All right, I'm going to stop sharing again and see what the issue is with this. Okay, now are you seeing the 2 or the 1?
Seeing the one.
Okay. Now we can advance. Okay. So Greenplay's done probably 650 plus of these types of master plans across the country. So we kind of come with I call it a library of successful trends that we see, things we can test, things that we can kind of bring to the table, see if they're going to work in unique situations. And as Corey said, we're really looking at a very unique project here, being the key word of integration, of bringing all of the social services, the community health network, all of you folks, and I think we identified 27 boards that we're trying to get represented, as well as the public involved. So the slide you're seeing here is the process where we're going to have 4 major stages of public engagement. So just like Corey said, this is not going to be your only time to have your voice heard. We had a kickoff meeting that basically kind of laid out our schedule and our scope and how we were going to do focus groups and what have you. And we decided on a hybrid, partial virtual and in person. We're looking at the first week in February to come in for 3 straight days to do some on-site stuff. One of the things that we realized during the pandemic is we had more public participation virtually than we did when we would fly in and have a face-to-face meeting with folks. So it really worked very well to us. We've had virtual offices for over 10 years, so Zoom was nothing new to us. And so anyway, we think we've got a good package here. So we are now just starting out our information gathering. So the needs assessment portion, we're asking folks, what would you like to see in this plan? How do we integrate your organizations and interests into this plan? And that's through the focus groups and all the public input we're going to have. We're going to have our group come in February and visit every asset that is in the county, and not just map out on GIS what you have. We're going to assess the condition of it and really come up with a very elevated level of service mapping system that has the different types of layers on it. So we can do indoor facilities on a layer, we can do trails on a layer, we can do anything down to picnic tables or playgrounds or trash cans on layers. So through this input process, we will be looking at what are some of those priorities that we might put in layers. And then of course, we'll have one that puts all the layers on top of each other as what we call a resource map. We're also going to do a community profile, understanding the two town sites of Los Alamos and White Rock. So we're going to do all of this collectively, but also as what we would consider sub areas of Los Alamos and White Rock. So our demographics will match up with that, our level of service and so forth. I mentioned the trends that we will bring in and look at what trends might fit Los Alamos County. We've done an awful lot of work with outdoor recreation and tourism that might be some of those trends that would fit. Then our second engagement process with the public, but also with our internal team down there, will be findings and visioning. So we're going to really come back and say, here's everything that we heard. Here's a summary of our focus groups. We are going to put a statistically valid survey together. Again, we'll be able to categorize from White Rock and Los Alamos as well as overall. And that will be, I'm sorry, my phone's, we're in some other warning or watch or something. Can't shut it off. Okay.
National Weather Service. Severe thunderstorm warning in effect for this area until 5:30 p.m.
There, I sat on it. Okay. So anyway, the survey will be a mailed out, statistically valid, randomly distributed survey that we will tally separately from putting the exact same survey online and publicizing any way, shape, or form to everybody. We'd love everybody to take it. We compare them, but we tally them separately. And in most cases, they are very similar, but it gives everybody the opportunity to react to that. And then we'll share all that information during findings, look at what we call the key issues that have surfaced during all of this, and kind of where we heard it, from what, is it the survey, is it the focus groups, is it our touring, is it our assessment, is it the analysis work we've done on programs or operations or maintenance, and how loud we heard that across the board. To kind of summarize, here's really what this plan should and needs to focus on maybe in the next 10 years. And the other thing that Greenplay does, we kind of hang our hats on plans that are implementable and not just give you that wish list of what you ought to be doing, which means we will go down the priority list as far as your resources will carry you, and we will try to stretch your resources a little bit as well. So that visioning portion is where we start to talk about preliminary recommendations, so that we can kind of come back between steps 2 and 3 with everybody on the same page, write the draft master plan, and then come back and present that again to the internal, external teams and open public as here's the recommendations we're making, here's the timetable we're looking at, here's what they cost, and then give everybody the opportunity to look at that plan and send edits back through Corey's team, so that we want a edited version, one edited version that we can create that final plan and come back and present that hopefully for adoption. And then we always want to show I call the most important step is the implementation step. So that action plan that we put together, that we also like to stay hands-on and up to date, and at least annually look at how's it going, what can we do different, or how can we help. All right, Corey, if you would go through, as we did last night, just the projects in progress and opportunities as you know them, so everybody's up to date. And I will correct I did not do it on this one, and I meant to. I had a note to on that BMX track renovation. So I'll pay attention to what you say, and I'll type that in by later tonight.
Sure. So we've got the BMX track renovation kind of hit a snafu. The selected vendor came in extraordinary high. So we've got to revisit that. Our Brew Arena, we have new lights that are in progress of being installed there. The light standards are up. We also have the Pueblo Canyon Conceptual Trail and Skills Park. This is a plan to have a long bicycle trail from approximately the Aquatic Center down to the Y, with a couple of national interscholastic cycling association loops. These are for kids in our community that are mountain bikers that perform on this or a higher level. We have about 50 kids in those programs that really don't have a place to practice. Try to have a multimodal trail from really around the San Ildefonso roundabout to downtown, a skills park. That process is going on, and there'll be some public meetings on that the second week in January. As Bob noted, we are in process of looking at an RFP to add some additional courts to a location so we can have a tournament location. And then we have a couple of gymnasiums on shared space with the public schools. One is currently being scoped for an RFP up around the Los Alamos Middle School. And then there's another one that will receive state funding for the design somewhere in White Rock, probably around the Ymca Elementary area. So those are some things in progress that are happening right now. No, I don't think the gymnasium is planned on moving the tween center. There was some conversation of it going there, but I still think the location of a tween center is up in the air, Lisa. And then here are some ideas that staff and I've kind of heard from members of the community over the past year that are on that list. A couple of high ones or ones that seem have multiple areas is, can we make Camp May a really cool campground? Is it time to look at artificial turf on our athletic fields? It's neat to hear that Abby's talking about an All Abilities playground. Is that something we need more of? We have what's called FEMAville up on North Mesa. That's a lot of big open space that doesn't have a plan for it. It'd be nice to do a master plan to consider that. Cricket pitch. Ellen, that could be added to it. That's just not one I've heard of that needs to be on the list, so we can add that one for consideration. Again, this is what this is all about, is to get all these ideas out there, and then we'll have a needs assessment and then try to rank them. So Pat, back to you.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're looking at, in a nutshell, kind of these 5 elements of healthy systems. As you look at warrant for action, why and who, and the community systems, who are the stakeholders, and as we call actors, and the intersections, as you guys have already pointed out, that you intersect with everybody. Inventory of the assets we talked about, and then policies and procedures and fiscal resources at the end. So we're really looking at what are we doing, is it working, and how can we improve? So with that, I've got about 8 questions here that if you guys can just unmute and try not to talk over each other. It's just kind of an open forum that, again, I want to make sure we are recording so we can make sure we get everything down. But what are the current strengths of the Los Alamos County Community Services? What are they doing well right now that we need to continue?
Since Corey has come in, listening.
Good.
I'd say the library system is awesome. and senior center.
Yep.
I think we have a lot of amazing programs and a lot of, amazing, sorry, I'm getting a phone call. A lot of amazing resources out there. I think one of our weaknesses is getting the word out there for families, especially those who are new in town, in knowing about those programs. That's
So a marketing issue is a challenge and or a weakness.
So if I could tag on to that a little bit, this is Carrie. One of the things we see, Chair of BabyNet, which is a subcommittee of the Health Council, one of the things that we see with this prenatal to 5 kind of segment of the population is we have services, but we're all kind of tucked in our individual little corners. And sometimes it's hard for people to find us. Usually once they find one of us, we can point them to where they need to be, but it would be nice if we could figure out how to make that segment of services more cohesive and available.
definitely the accessibility.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Lisa. So I would say, like, again, the aquatic center is incredible. Our senior centers are incredible. One of the things that we hear, and we just had a meeting last month through JJAB regarding youth, is that the youth really don't feel like there's anything for them specifically to do in town. We have the teen center, but again, kind of limited hours. And so there's not anything as far as youth-wise and availability for them. And it could be more of a communication item, but also there's just not a lot going on for that population.
How well is the teen centers, how well are they utilized?
Diana, do you want to answer that, or?
I'm just trying to unmute myself. My goodness, we were having on an hourly basis 89 students after school. During the pandemic, it's dropped down to 35, 38. So what we're facing is our second year of classes that haven't naturally integrated, haven't been together to give the word of mouth and have these like open house grill parties that welcome the 8th graders in. So frankly, my goodness, I can look at the website real quick, but I think they're open from noon to 10 or 11 at night. I think those are huge hours, and Saturdays. The only thing that is not open according to the contract was Sundays and certain holidays. I remember that there's been some critique in other forums about being able to get students from White Rock to the teen center in Los Alamos, but I don't know how relevant that is. I think it's very well utilized, and we have to report quarterly or more to Los Alamos County Community Services, and as probably does the Youth Activity Center.
Great.
And I tell you, so many programs that we partner with, there's always skill building. So, and again, we're just in a little dip because of this pandemic.
Everybody is coast to coast.
Yeah, and I think the teen center offers so much, but again, it is only high school, so doesn't include our middle school youth. And then I think there's just a bigger population too of kids that want other things outside of that. So the teen center is one piece of it.
Okay.
And I think
My kids love the teen center. I think there's things like, bowling or going to the movies. There's just not those activities in town available for kids other than the teen center. My kids love the teen center. So awesome.
so what we've been seeing from the court side is a large increase for our youth with their drug use and substance abuse. And I think for the most part, when we talk about this in meetings, and this was not from my meeting, this was from JJAB, the idea is that we need to replace this negative behavior with positive behavior. And people at the Y and community services and everyone are so interested in like putting out activities, addressing this problem. But the reality is, I think one of the biggest weaknesses in our community is we have no drug and alcohol substance abuse treatment for teens or youth. And I think it needs to be addressed like next month.
Okay.
I think a positive, I'm delighted that we have a social services department. To me, it still feels new. It was a long time coming. I think they've probably been around, what now, 5 or 6 years. And I think with this transition in leadership in that department, that there's a lot of potential for broadening the scope and services. Right now, it seems to have settled on a pretty narrow scope of services, but then it feels like in the past anyway, things would get thrown at the department that didn't fit anywhere else. And then the resources would be spread even thinner. That being said, I'm delighted that we have that. They do a lot to help our more vulnerable populations. And that's something that I think we need to have our eye to in the future as we plan of how do we support vulnerable populations, lower income, the near poor, young families coming in with loads of student debt, maybe look like they're earning enough to make it, but between the housing prices and student debt, they're barely scraping by. And so even though a lot of our recreational opportunities are pretty reasonably priced, those folks are priced out of being able to participate. Another area I want to comment on is the ice rink and the pool. Those are jewels of our community, and the libraries. I said that in the chat. And I will say out loud, I put it in the chat about roller derby. Roller derby is probably one of the most inclusive activities in the town. And for the youth league was life-changing for my daughter. I've seen how it's changed the lives of adults too, but they don't have anywhere to practice indoors that's adequate. And so they're very weather dependent when using the ice rink when it's not used as an ice rink. And then the indoor spaces that they've been allowed to use have been pretty inadequate. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Any other strengths or weaknesses of the community services?
I'll add. Oh, go ahead, Liz.
I would like to add that I think the people are a strength. I mean, we have a lot of people in this town, not only in community services, but just in all these nonprofits who really care. And I think that's a strength that we have in our town. And also, I think we do a pretty good job at collaborations. Can always be better, but I think that we do collaborate among organizations well. I think that I understand teens need a place, but I would like to see more opportunities for teens out in the community, out in other organizations, volunteer opportunities, programming opportunities that are provided by other people out in the community. So for us, for example, I would love to have some teen volunteers or get a volunteer corps together, maybe have some programs for teens to participate in. I know there are kids who are interested, but it's just hasn't happened yet. So maybe having some support to get some of those kinds of opportunities for teens in our community, I think would be great.
I also wanted to also shout out for the little kids. I love the support for teens. I have teens myself, but I also really feel like we need, one of the weaknesses I think in our community is the lack of awareness of children with special needs. And that's in activities, and I know that we're working on that and we're growing that process, but it's, you know, in our parks and in our in, in different programs, that the support for smaller children who have special needs and to accommodate them, I think that is a little bit of a weakness, and those families can get isolated.
Oh, Abby, there was a program a few years ago, it's been a while, but where we had some, I don't know, there was funding, and I'm not positive where it came from, but it was to provide like aides that would help in the arts program. And the aides were, I'm not sure who they were paid by, but there were aides so that they could accept more children, with special needs in those programs. So that's maybe a model.
Hi, I also want to comment on other positive things about, I think our county's trails and open spaces are awesome. The fire department, police department are great. I did want to say that I built, for the near poor, as I'm a grant writer, and I think, my goodness, we don't have our latest census right now, but Los Alamos looks to have about 3 to 4% or close to 800 people in poor and near poor, or in the poverty level, actually. And so the Y does have scholarships for parents and children, and with the exception of these COVID years, we've usually been servicing about 300 out of those 800. So it's 100 adults and 200 children. So there is some resources for that. And in health memberships as well.
One of the
Bob, I see your hand
challenges,
up.
yeah, one of the challenges, I've been here 35 years, and I've probably put out 10 to 15 different tennis court proposals. The rink is one of them. And whatever we need to do, we need to figure out a better way to listen to, I consider, majority, because all it has taken in most of those cases has been a few people politically powered and kills it. Now, that's life. I understand that. But in a small community like this, it's real. And to Pat, I would say, whatever process you use to help us, that needs to be always considered, because it's going to happen. But we need to have a better system to at least attempt to nullify that minor component that just makes it happen.
Yeah, well, again, in most cases, the statistically valid survey will prioritize and be plus or minus 5% of what an entire community will say about those priorities.
Yeah.
And one thing that I will say, Bob, in a lot of cases, when we talk about your overall population and then how many people participate in anything, everybody's is a minority, whether it's sports or whether it's, when we talk about 3% of your population being in a certain group,
right? Those
are minorities when it comes to voting stuff. So it's not just tennis, it's an uphill battle for everybody.
Yeah.
It's amazing when we go into communities and find out, we hear sports, and then we know, nationally, less than 30% of the population is even interested in sports. It's just they have a loud voice and they play in big, expensive sandboxes. So
that's for sure.
It is, you are correct in that uphill battle, but we're going to do the best not to come in and say, well, okay, we're going to rattle the try to move the tennis folks up the priority list. We're going to allow the process to take its course and then look at those results and say, okay, now here's how we best practice or package this. And sometimes it doesn't mean you only do the top 4 or 5 things, because
right.
through partners, through grants, through some of that list that Corey has put out there that are in the works, they're in the works for a reason, even if they don't come up as the high priority. So I do understand, obviously, we've been in this business, you know, myself too, for 40+ years, and the politics do come into play. But what I can say about our process is, I use 2 quotes. We have no horse in the race or no dog in the fight.
Sure.
So everything is open game here. We want to put the best plan together to maximize resources to get as many people out doing stuff in a healthy environment. So appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Juanita, I see your hand up, and Lauren, I see your hand up.
This is Lauren. I'll jump in. So everybody has had great comments, but I just wanted to add that, you know, some more strengths that I see is just we have so many great amenities and assets that are well maintained too in the county for a community of our size, from the golf course to the outdoor ice rink to our Olympic sized pool, the library system. All of that's really great. And I echo what Liz said too. It's the people, the community organizations and resources that we have available to the community is tremendous. I think Catherine and other county staff do a great job with the quarterly events booklet, which highlights, you know, all of the services that are available. And while I know she distributes it around town, and we're working with her to come up with a cohesive community calendar through FYI Los Alamos, I still think there's opportunity for community organizations and community services to get together, plan ahead on some events and activities, so we're not overlapping each other. We're in more communication, and then we have kind of a central hub for new community members coming in, because I do agree with another comment earlier that oftentimes new community members don't even know where to start when it comes to connecting with these great resources. The visitor center sees a lot of new community members, and you know, they share the quarterly events booklets, details about the FYI calendar, but I still think that could be an opportunity.
Great, thank you. Juanita?
Yeah, so a lot of what I would say is probably echoing what everyone else has said as far as the strengths. You know, they have the movies in the parks, they have the concerts, the trails, you know, the ice rink, the swimming pool, all of those things. I just feel like kind of what everybody's saying, it would be nice if community services was like centrally located, or maybe like the hub that we could all go to coordinate all of these kinds of things, so that there was one place that, okay, you can go there, but they know who also, you know, they work with Family Cares, and they work with Lemonade Living, and that is in the know, oh, maybe you need JJAB, maybe you need, you know, Family Strengths, because we don't necessarily have a central hub like everyone's kind of saying. And then I think also everyone's kind of said is somehow to really, really, really figure out how to get the kids involved. Because yes, we do have a teen center, and I'm going to echo what Lisa already said, in that kids just don't go. I don't necessarily know if it's the hours. I don't know if it's a stigma of what the current kids go. I don't know, but they're not attracted. I have 9 children, and they've been going to the school for I don't even know how many years now, and the only time they went to the teen center was when the transition from 8th to 9th grade was, and they were super excited, and then they never went. So I think really trying to figure out how we get our kids excited and like help them be leaders and be the people that like lead this and come alongside with us.
I want to comment on that. Back maybe 10, 15 years ago, I believe that the county was busing the kids from White Rock up here. Now, I don't see any reason why you can't bus them from the schools down there. Parents have to go pick them up otherwise when they're in work and take them, or mother has to that's not working, and then pick them up later. So an idea might be the county could still contract busing the kids to the teen center I was part of that in the early days, getting it started, and it was difficult to get going. And I'm sure it still have some of the same challenges, but I think it's a great opportunity. I feel what I'm doing is out of place with all of you, but I'm still going to work on it.
Okay, so let's move on to our next two questions. If you have any additional strengths or challenges or weaknesses, let's chat those in there and we'll make sure we get them added to the list. We're again this is kind of a brainstorming session is what we look at. So we're not solving problems today. So if it's been said, that's great. We wish we had time to get everybody's opinion on every one of these topics, but I want to respect your time, and I know we had a half-hour delay. So if it gets to the point where you need to go, we'll respect that as well. But my intent is to still do the hour and a half, so we'll push on here. Okay, this next slide is talking about, what additional programming, activities, and services do you feel should be offered by the Los Alamos County Community Services? I know we've heard a lot of them already, but which ones have not been mentioned that we need to talk about? And then the second part of this is, what facilities, amenities, or improvements to existing facilities would you like to see? And then again, we've heard some of those as well. But any new stuff to add to these two topics?
I have a thought with the facility that's being thought about in White Rock in conjunction with the school rebuild. I would love to see a multi-purpose kind of facility that could accommodate recreation and sports, but also a small to medium-sized performing arts kind of venue, and in a multi-purpose setup so that when it was needed for a 200 to 300 people performance space, it could be used that way. When it needed to be for smaller breakout rooms or a court or whatever, to be used that way.
Okay, and I'm going to throw a clarification out, at least what we look at when we hear performing arts center and multi-purpose used for other things. That to me means that there's no sloping floor and that elevated seating, which typically in a true performing arts center, you're going to have permanent seating in a sloped area with a stage, with lighting, with all that stuff that is more dedicated space. So what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is multi-purpose, multi-generational, like a gym. We call them MAC gyms that are multi-activity centers. So they don't have a wooden floor that you're going to tear up. They have a very durable floor that you can have, roller skate on. You do all that stuff in there. And then a multi-purpose large area that might be able to be split into smaller areas that could be a quasi place for some community theater or kids plays or things like that. Is that a better summation of what you were talking about?
I think that is. Of course, I would love to see a real performing arts kind of center, but we're probably going more pie in the sky on that. And we've had our experience with trying to add every single possible use into a facility and then it failing when it came to the voters. Yeah. So that is where I'm coming from.
And I tend to think with the end in mind, and as we are going to put a survey together, that's where I would have, I'd have an issue with, okay, is it really a performing arts center? Is it really this? Because we don't want to dilute the vote on a multi-purpose kind of space for everybody, thinking it's a performing arts center, when I think the biggest difference is that it's dedicated space versus multi-purpose because of the slope form of seating. So.
Agreed. Multi-purpose is where I'm headed. Thank you.
Okay, what else? Anybody? I see some hands up. Jordan and Lisa is what I see, and I can only see about 4 of you at a time. So
I'll jump in. So I think one of the things too, and kind of along the same lines you're talking about the multi-purpose, but on a different level, is that really looking at every facility we currently have and what we would want to see as improvement, how can those be more inclusive? So I think a lot of times we run into not only, talking a little bit more on the generational part of it, but we need a program for seniors, we need a program for youth, or we need a sport for this. How can we incorporate everyone? But also along the lines as far as like Abby was talking about with, our children with disabilities, and how can all of that just be more inclusive to where we're not recreating these programs each time we have a program and everyone's involved in it.
right. And can I don't want to put words in your mouth, but also assume that some of this about existing facilities for certain uses could be about capacity and increasing capacity for all those all-inclusive types of programs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Jordan?
Yeah, thanks. I want to echo what Lisa said about both capacity and then being able to use spaces for more than one thing. A lot of times we get a space together and it's perfect for one major thing, but then it sits and it's awkward for anything else the rest of the day. And then you've got 7 other programs that could all use some space, but there's nowhere for them. So I think it would be good to think of facilities that could serve multiple purposes, that might not necessarily use the exact same floor plan every single time. One of the things that was talked about in the last 18, 24 months was a social services hub. Well, you could easily build an office hub in the same footprint as a gym. You just put the offices adjacent to it or above it, and they'll be like, hey, wow, we just gained 2 totally different needs that don't even step on each other by co-locating them using the same parking spaces. And because they are used at different times of the day, it doesn't create a conflict. I think a lot of the spaces that we have sit empty all at the same time during the day, and nobody can use them for anything because they're designated just for that. So maybe finding ways to improve those spaces, or at least portions of those spaces, could be just as beneficial, if not more beneficial, than a brand new building or facility that isn't designed to achieve multiple things.
One of the things, add to that, I've seen, talking about the teen center, is county's ability to hire enough people, staffing it through the appropriate hours. And we build these things, and then the county does not have enough money in the budget to do what I just talked about and what you're talking about, Jordan. And one of the things that I proposed 2010, I think it was indoor tennis courts out on the golf course. And they were open 24 hours a day because it was security was with a key card. You paid as a member and you got that key card and you could go in and play tennis 24 hours a day. And so somehow we have to do a better job at access to the facilities. I saw someone put out a note about entry to the facilities, access, when, and try not to make it to where it's only where the staff is going to be there during the daytime. Somehow we got to figure out ways to keep these facilities open 24 hours a day. We're not doing it, I can tell you that.
I wonder if we could get back to the question where we're really just brainstorming and dreaming rather than getting into all the problems and how are we going to actually do this. I think those are all really valid points and something that we'll have to deal with. But at this point, my understanding is we're brainstorming and dreaming. Is that right, Pat?
That is correct. Carrie, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a plug again for some of our disabled young adults, but out of high school. And then there's also a little bit of a gap that we see in the between age 3 and age 5. So there's some programming going on with that right now. We have Lemonade Living, who's really trying to help when kids are no longer in high school, but still need a place to be during the day or job opportunities. And I think it'd be really important to support that momentum that's gathered and we're getting going in the community.
Okay. Anything else on these two topics that we haven't already talked about? Okay. And again, we've already touched on some of these, so let's look for new stuff. But what portions of the county are underserved by the community services? And of course, we've heard a lot of demographic. How about geographic and those we haven't already mentioned? So as we collect these notes, we kind of put them in a lot of the conversations we pull apart and put them in these different questions, if that makes sense. So, and then the second part of that is who are key partners and stakeholders in the community with regards to assisting with this integrated plan? And I think we have a very good list, most of which are coming from the folks we're talking to. So I want to kind of surface that with, ones we haven't thought of or that so far haven't connected, because I hear that there's some good collaboration. I think everybody knows who these folks are that we're talking to, but is there anyone kind of missing that we need to reach out to or include in this plan?
I think the schools,
Okay.
the K to 12, especially the athletic directors at the different sites, but also representing elementary and UNMLA, the local community college branch of the University of New Mexico should be included.
Okay.
In strategic planning for the YMCA, we have identified multiple years in the past the need for young adults, like post high school, college, up to 24 places to gather. I sometimes think, is this what the bars are doing, or is this an older crowd? Because I don't go there and I don't know, but we've heard and discussed multiple times the need for a place for them to be able to gather and meet. And so it's on our radar at the Y as well, that we're trying to address that need too.
Okay, good.
I would also add the faith-based centers in town. I mean, the churches provide, some extensive programming also, and different events, and also help a lot of the nonprofits.
Good. Dan, your hand's up. Is it meant to be?
I meant to put it down. I've already spoken. Thank you.
Okay, I thought so, but I just wanted to make sure. Okay, so any other underserved areas or demographic? We do also know that the split between Los Alamos and White Rock is not necessarily what we would consider underserved, but there might be some folks through, particularly users that feel that, particularly in White Rock, that they're underserved. So we acknowledge that kind of on the onset.
I can speak to that as a 25-year White Rocker. I'm delighted to have the splash pad there. And I think the more amenities that come there and a similarly overlooked park, the more people get from townsite get used to coming down. It doesn't feel quite as far. And people from White Rock constantly going up the hill, but coming down the hill seems a lot harder. So, and a third of the population and growing is in White Rock. So, and there's more land for building things. So, thank you.
Can I second? Can I just put a second on everything Ellen just said? I've been here in White Rock for 30 years. Occasionally we feel a little bit like the redheaded stepchild. We would love to see this plan include some things for White Rock.
Well, and I hope it's better than it used to be. Full disclosure, I've been on a couple of Los Alamos County projects that were about facilities. So I was around when that splash pad, but that was part of a plan that I can't lay claim to, but I was on a team that did that. So very familiar with that. And that's why I wanted to bring it up and have you guys recognize that we understand that. And I will throw out there that we've worked in all types of communities. There's one in Florence, Arizona that has the same issue in the same boundaries of a municipality 10 miles away. And one of them is all enclosed in an HOA that does not allow the city to come in and build anything. Yet all the residents in there, want stuff and they're paying taxes for stuff. So, that and the other one I'll bring up is the large northern third of Arizona, Coconino County, where all those little towns, and then 90% of the population lives in Flagstaff, which is on the very southern edge. And I'm trying to get a plan to help folks, realizing it didn't make sense for people to be in an organization that traveled 4 hours to work or between parks, but what resources can you give? So I think there's an element there based on what we've been talking about, collaboration and all that, where you don't have to build two of everything, but what might complement each other. And, now some of that Los Alamos crowd goes to White Rock for some things. So that's kind of what we're looking for here is identifying, those underserved, so that now we can look at from a facility perspective, from a programming perspective, from a collaboration, what's the best thing to do?
Well, the White Rock facilities around Rocket Ship Park is a great example of how the strength of co-locating with the library, the youth activity center, the play park, the Frisbee, I'm blanking on the name of what that's called, the Frisbee course and the splash pad all being co-located is such a strength.
Disc golf's what you're looking for.
Thank you, disc golf. And so having that model in mind, I only wish the senior center were there too. That was a missed opportunity 15 years ago.
Okay. All right, Abby, I see your hand.
I was just going to bring up another underrepresented, underserved portion of our community is the Spanish-speaking, and not just the Spanish-speaking community, but we have a really diverse population. It's a huge multicultural community. A lot of Asian folks come here and they work at the lab, and so we have this population of English second language population that really needs to be addressed, because they feel very isolated, especially the wives that come along or the husbands that come along with their spouse who is working at the laboratory. And so it's serving those children and it's serving those families.
Great. Okay, again, anything else comes up, throw it in the chat and we'll get it down. So we'll talk about key issues and values that Los Alamos County Services need to consider when putting this plan together. And then what are the priorities? So if you can't have everything, what in your opinion is a priority?
I think Judge Allen pointed out something very good earlier is despite the things that we do have, substance abuse is still a really big issue. And a lot of the different programs that we have try to touch on it, but there just is not enough treatment. We've doubled our staff in the last 2 years and we are still maxed out. So finding ways to help address that either through programming and prevention or treatment or both, it would be really important.
So Jordan, I'm going to just to get some clarification from my behalf, thinking as this integration and sharing of resources, and even if it's one hub, so all those resources are known by all, I'm hearing that there's not just a issue with people knowing about the services and getting to those services, it's they're already busting at the seams, and there's not capacity for more unless you create that capacity. Is that a correct assumption?
That's correct.
Okay. So again, I think part of this plan and part of the integration of this plan and its uniqueness is probably going to be some recommendations on behalf of other agencies with the area of expertise that they have. So this plan can help. So not every one of these agencies has to do a master plan, so to speak. We can speak on your behalf of, here's a recommendation that if there's more capacity built here, then this plan can assist in getting folks to the services they need and that are available. So I just want to point that out because that to me is two different issues, if that makes sense.
I do have a comment or question that I need to kind of forward as just a member of the community, because I'm reading some of our chat and the thoughts about free services. And I wish things could be free, but somebody's going to have to pay for the maintenance of facilities, the staff that is going to man, clean, everything like this. So, and as a grant writer, all I know is people are always saying, hey, you've got to work to sustainability. How are you going to make this float on its own? So I just don't think that a free, I wish it could be free. I wish, but you know, even the Geneva Chavez Center, everywhere you go, you have to pay. Right now, our county subsidizes just about everything. That swimming pool is a wonderful facility. We can access it relatively cheaply, but it's not free. And it's not even enough to cover the operating costs. So I want to say somehow we need to have a realistic thing. We need to pay for services. I don't know. I just had to state it. I don't know exactly what I mean, but.
That's the same that most communities are, I don't want to say struggling with, but they haven't figured out that magic touch. We have made recommendations on some very successful ways of doing that in communities where that percentage of near poor or in poverty is in the 40 percentile, and still being able to. One thing that we do know universally is when people see free stuff, they place no value on it. So I sign my kid up, I haven't paid anything, they don't feel like going, they throw a tantrum, we don't go, and everybody gets hurt. So our system, we'll look at all that stuff. We're going to look at programming, we're going to look at pricing, we're going to look at participation levels, all that stuff. And we will have some recommendations in there that are kind of that part of that trends I talked about, what we see that really works. And I will say that our pricing policy that includes those that can't afford to pay is pretty universal, but needs to be customized per community. And it really allows a focus on who receives the benefit of the program, meaning the participant versus the taxpayer. And then it also, you know, where do we want our tax dollars to support? So you can then call out those things that are pretty obvious, the mowing and all that stuff. You know, people aren't going to pay, you know, playing on a playground, all that. But then you can start to put some of those underserved demographic folks where you want them within so you're actively saying, yes, we want to support these people more than our average demographic. And then it's a formula that everybody kind of buys into and understands because everybody's a consumer. And then I will say that the scholarship program is part of that. And usually we can recommend ways to get the business community at a very low rate because you want as many involved as possible and you want to create it as the list in town that's publicized annually that they do not want to be left off of. And that is helping those families that can't afford it. And we've seen very good success with it. So, but good point as far as, again, us trying to identify that those things that we need to look at.
And I think one of the things that would be important is that that information is communicated in future RFPs if there is a thought of creating a cost. Because you wouldn't want different organizations saying, hey, we can do this program for $300,000, but we're going to charge $5 for every kid to come in. And another agency says we can do it for $325,000 and it's going to be free. You're not even comparing the same offering. And
Right.
so if it's not in the RFP, nobody knows what to expect.
Well,
and I think that's a policy decision that needs to be put up front.
Right. And you also want to look at those duplication of services. And, you know, if there is duplication, who does it best and how can we support you?
Hey, Pat, I don't want to be a wet blanket on this great conversation, but we got about 12 minutes and we've already kind of run over a little bit because we started late. So I think we need to try to wrap this one up by the top of the hour and respect this additional 30 minutes that this great group has given us today.
That's exactly what I had in mind. And I just got one slide left, which is next steps. So any last minute issues, key issues, values, or priorities that you just want to throw out there or chat in?
Just real quick, I just want to second the capacity piece. I think our county does a lot of work on talking about growing the county and creating physical space and new homes. But we don't talk about growing the capacity of the organizations that are serving here. And I see it especially with some of the issues we're seeing with youth and the whole mental health issue that we're already at capacity with.
Also, just real quick, and you may cover this, but Corey, I'd be interested in wondering, so the County Health Council is working on a community health plan. How does all of this tie in with that?
So we already have some pretty good existing data. We have the youth risk survey, we have the community survey, we have the I'm going to get it wrong, the New Mexico oh gosh, they have the data that shows a lot of these issues that's in a file for these guys to get a hold of. And then any information we get along the process, they'll be privy to it. I'm thinking that health plan is going to be a little bit further down in the weeds than where this one's probably going to wind up. I would think this would be more of some goals and objectives with some big actions, and then that actual health plan will dive down into the weeds of how do we actually accomplish that.
And I will add to that, we did on our first focus group this week, they were on our call, and we asked the same question, that the time frame doesn't work. They're on the same time frame we are, although we talked about sharing any information that they have that we can get access to, along with what Corey just said is out there. And so what we would see is that we would, as close as possible, mimic what they're doing, and then they can kind of take the details a little bit further. So we would kind of endorse what they're doing and recognize some of those same goals, objectives. And it might be that some of our recommendations are to, integrate their plan after it's finished. And by integrate, it might just be pull out their goals and be aware of them. So,
Pat, you might also want to talk about your and Teresa's relationship with GP Red, of how that is another resource that's going to be part of
Yes.
this.
We at Greenplay, we established a 501c3. Of course, I can't say it's an arm of Greenplay for IRS purposes and all that, but essentially GP Red stands for Greenplay Research, Education, and Development. And we have some of the top park and recreation and health professionals, I'm going to say, in the country that are on the board, that are at arm's length. So we deal with, we have webinars all the time. We are up to date on all of the issues, everything from the RDI stuff to health, to all the things we're trying to integrate here. And that's one resource that we can pull in. One of our owners, Dr. Teresa Penbrook, actually splits her time between Greenplay and GP Red. So that's a very good resource to us to pull in as we look at what's happening out there in the trends. We also, like I said, we have this consortium of folks that focus on some of these other areas much more than us in Parks and Recreation to draw upon. So I'm glad you brought that up, Corey. That is between that and your local stuff is where we're going to get her, and from the input like tonight. So,
and then
okay, I'm going to move on. As Corey said, try to, we've extended this about the same length of time as we had the rain out, but appreciate you all sticking around. Real quickly, our next steps, kind of not taking that whole graphic that I had earlier, but we're gonna come back. I have January here, but I think it's the last day of January that week. We're looking at coming in for 3 days where we'll have scheduled focus groups to continue the same thing. Just so you know, you're not missing anything other than the discussion, because we're going to do the same questions and try to cover as many of these folks as possible. We also will have this, Corey has this PowerPoint electronically. If there's people that really haven't been touched, we can get their input and get it in our quarry. When we're finished with that, we are going to put a summary of what we heard. So what are the things we heard the most of on these questions, put it in a PowerPoint, and we will put an open public webinar together that will be able to get up to 500 people there. The involvement and input part of it will be chat only. That allows us to do the presentation, and we will assign people to off our team to monitor the chat, answer questions, ship some of those questions over to Corey and his team as panelists. They can choose to answer it, or we can also say, this is good for the group. So we'll kind of jump in the presentation and say, well, we had a question about this that we're going to answer at the end of the webinar. So they tend to work very well, but that would be the next touch point with you guys to hear what everybody said in that summary. Then we're going to put a statistically valid survey together that will be mailed, and then a couple of weeks later be online. We're looking at February or March, probably there. That inventory assessment I talked about in February. And then we're going to come back with 2 different virtual finding presentations. One will be on all of the things that the summaries that we heard, and focus on the analysis work and the survey results. And then later on, we'll come back with all the inventory stuff because we find if we do it in the same meeting, it's a really long meeting. And as we start to split those out as best practices, it's working a lot better virtually. So I think with that, I want to make sure I put this slide up there. Anything that you think of down the road, here's my email and phone number. And I truly am one of these that if I'm not on a plane or asleep or don't hear my phone, that I will pick it up. And feel free to send me anything, anything you forgot, anything that you heard next week that is pertinent to what we're doing. We want to hear it all on as close to the front end as we can, so that we now can develop this thing. So with that, Corey's got all your information, and we'll be inviting you back on these 4 different touch points that I went through. And I really appreciate you sticking around, no pun intended, but through the storm. And looked like it was worse on our end other than electricity than your end. So I'm hoping my compadres are safe, and the tornado has passed some of our houses. So anyway, thank you guys. And then Corey, if you got any wrap ups, feel free.
I appreciate you all being part of this. We'll do as many focus groups as we do. We try to keep these groups between about 10 and 20 people, just because it's manageable in this format to get your comments and thoughts and allow you to interact. So that's why you don't see a whole lot of people here. We're going to be doing more of these. We've got about 120 people on our list for focus groups across the platform. I see in the chat that you've got some other ideas. I'll verify that those are on our list. I also wanted to let you know that on the county webpage, there's a project page for CSD on the right-hand side of the main webpage. All these meetings, once we get them, we're having to save them to our YouTube channel, because for some reason the transcription is a separate file and it doesn't show. But we're saving those. We're putting those links of these meetings on that website. So if you want to know what another group has said, you can go watch 90 minutes and see what somebody else said if you desire that. It's taking us about a day and a half to 2 days to get them moved over. But there's a place for you to stay engaged there. Again, if you think of anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Pat or Teresa. And again, my desire from this is to truly get a comprehensive plan of all these great ideas we have in one place, prioritized by the community, so we have a game plan to move forward, and we don't do a whole lot of stop and starting like Bob identified earlier, and some of you have seen because you've been here so long. So again, thank you so much for participating, and look forward to more conversations as we move through this process.
Thank you.
And Corey, I'm a little bit of housekeeping. If you would, once you get those recordings and or chats, if you can send those to Dan and I, particularly Dan wasn't on here to take his own notes, but we also go back and we listen to everything and make sure we get everything in there. So, and then I would say, if you don't want to sit through 90 minutes of however many of these we do, that open webinar summary is going to summarize all of these in probably an hour to, no more than 90 minutes. So, and I truly want to thank you as well as for your time tonight, and stay tuned. We're just getting started.
Y'all have a good evening.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.